After I completed my course, you might say, on the Divine Comedy, I thought to myself, what should I do next? And I toyed around with a bunch of ideas. I was going to pivot into the area of philosophy. Then I was thinking of doing Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And finally I decided, look, I'm actually going to go to the very beginning of Western civilization and do a kind of mini course on the two great epics of ancient Greece. These are the foundational epics of Athens. And since Athens and Jerusalem are the twin pillars of the West, these are epics that have had immeasurable influence on Western civilization, on Christianity, and then also on the Renaissance and some of the cultural developments since then. They are built into the fabric of our civilization. I think it's fair to say you can't really be an educated person and know nothing about them. And so we're going to be going through the two great epics. These are the epics of Homer, and they're called the Iliad and the Odyssey. We'll do the Iliad first, and then the Odyssey. We're not going to cover them line by line or even book by book, but just as with Dante, I'm going to focus and highlight episodes that connect with each other and help us to unfurl this magnificent narrative that's created by Homer. I'll say a word first about the idea of an epic. An epic is, for the ancient Greeks, an epic was nothing more than a story. Epic meant nothing more than a story that is in a certain type of rhyme that was sung, at least in the ancient world, by bards. A bard is a kind of poetic singer. And of course, this goes before the age of writing. These were originally oral epics delivered in song, I think originally at religious festivals. And then, of course, eventually someone wrote them down. Now, because of the huge influence of the Iliad and the Odyssey, epic, after that, came to mean something different than it did before. It no longer meant any story. It now meant stories that are like the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the Iliad is a story about war and heroism and glory and love and death. It's a story of the interaction between men and the gods. This is an age of polytheism, so there are many gods, and we'll talk more about that. The Odyssey is a story of homecoming, of adventure, of family, and so the Iliad and the Odyssey came to define the two types of epic. You could almost call it the epic of war, the Iliad, and the epic of peace, the Odyssey. And now there's peace in the Iliad and there's war, or at least the after effects of war, in the Odyssey. In fact, both epics are connected to each other in that they are about a single momentous event. And that event is the Trojan War. The Trojan War was a war between Greece and Troy. Troy is now in northern, it was north of Greece, and it's now in modern-day Turkey. And this war, generally regarded to be a mythical war, but it's important to know that that is not how the ancient Greeks saw it. So let's throw some dates on here. The Trojan War is dated to around the 13th century BC, so the 1200s BC. The epic, the story of the Trojan War, was composed later, maybe around the 8th or 9th century BC. Our knowledge of those epics dates back really to the 5th century BC, the heyday of ancient Greece. And my point is that the Greeks in the 5th century BC believed that the Trojan War actually happened. They believed that the Trojan War was an actual event, not something mythical or made up, not merely a product of literature, but rather a product of history. Moreover, the ancient Greeks of the 5th century BC believed that the gods were not only real. I mean, it comes as no surprise that we consider this to be Greek mythology. They didn't. For them, it was, in fact, Greek religion. The gods for them were not only real, but in their view, the gods lived on planet Earth. In other words, the gods lived on a particular part of Earth that's called Mount Olympus. And they believed that there was a kind of a heroic age, an age before their own time, in which men had interactions with the gods. And they believed that that age had then come to an end. But part of what the Iliad and the Odyssey does, and in fact so does Greek tragedy, is it memorializes and captures that last time. And think of the analogy here very interestingly with Christianity, because if we go to the very beginnings of Christianity, we find that there was a time, let's call it the Garden of Eden, where God interacted directly with Adam and Eve. And then there was a time even later in the Old Testament where God seems to have communicated pretty directly, even if they didn't see him, with people like Moses and Abraham. God talked to them. They knew exactly what God is saying. And now we live in an age where that doesn't seem to happen, at least not in the same way. So there is a kind of mirroring between the Christian story, in which there was a time, a heroic time, in which human beings interacted with, obviously not the gods, but the one monotheistic God. And on the other hand, the Iliad and the Odyssey, where in the Greek world that we sometimes call pagan, the polytheistic world of the Greeks, you have heroic figures like Agamemnon, the Greek king, and Achilles, and Odysseus. And these are figures that interacted for the last time with the gods, and their stories, in that sense, live on for all time, and highlight in a way that other things can't the fundamental questions about what distinguishes human life, what makes life worth living, what makes gods different from human beings. These are all the fundamental questions that we will consider in the days and weeks ahead.